Chapter 21. Kuba lifted the newspaper. He's dead. Kaput. We were standing in the snow around the body of John. I wasn't sure how they could tell. John was no grayer, no more silent than usual. Other people walked by, not looking. Shoes, said Ferdy. John had fine shoes like the rest of us, except Big Henrik. When one pair wore out, we stole another. Somebody will take them, said Enos. But it's John, said Oleg. He meant to point at John, but only his shoulder moved forward. Sometimes Oleg forgot his right arm was gone. Give them to Big Henrik. Yuri's voice. He hadn't been there a moment ago. Big Henrik doesn't like shoes, I said. This was true. Even before the ghetto, even before the jackboots came, Big Henrik wore gray bank coin bags on his feet, even in the snow. They were tied at his ankles with drawstrings. They won't fit, said Ferdy. I couldn't tell if Ferdy's cloud breath was from the cold or his cigar. Big Henrik has little feet, said Yuri. Take them off. Kuba pulled off John's shoes. Yuri swiped away the snow with his foot. He made Big Henrik sit on the curb. He pulled off Big Henrik's bank bags. He put John's shoes on Big Henrik and tied them tight. Big Henrik stomped his feet like a big baby. He let out a loud squawk. Yuri grabbed Big Henrik's ears and twisted. I thought he was going to twist them off. Big Henrik's eyes bugged out. Using the ears as handles, Yuri hauled Big Henrik to his feet. He let Big Henrik squawk some more, then said to him, Are you going to wear the shoes? Big Henrik nodded sharply. Yuri let go. As we were walking away, I said to Yuri, Will an angel come for John? This is what I had heard under the braided rug, that when you die, an angel carries you off to a place called heaven. Enos, overhearing, sneered, Yeah, here comes the angel. It was a horse, so skinny it seemed made of sticks and paper bags, clopping through the snow and slush on the street. It was led by two bedraggled men, and it pulled a wagon with a dead and naked body on it. We looked back. The horse stopped at John. One of the men grabbed John by his feet and pulled him to the wagon. The other man grabbed John by his armpits, and together they swung him back and forth. It reminded me of the girl orphans jumping rope. Suddenly they let go of John, and he sailed through the air to the top of the other body. The wagon rolled on. Where are they taking him? I said. Where do you think? Said Enos. Off to heaven he goes. I believed him. Well, what happens there? I said. Kuba laughed. He becomes a jackboot. Others laughed loudly, even Yuri. I was confused. But he's dead. Oh, not anymore, said Furry. Nobody is dead in heaven, right, Yuri? Said Kuba. Everyone looked at Yuri. Yuri said nothing. Yeah, they pumped the air back into you and you're good as new, said Kuba. More laughter. Enos raised his fist. Let's hear it for heaven. Everyone cheered but Yuri, even Big Henrik, and then we were silent for a long time. The only sound came from Big Henrik trying out his new shoes, clopping them like a horse into the slush and snow. When he splattered the ankles of other people, they gave us ugly looks. Someone gave us more than that. A flop. Flops were all over the place. The jackboots hired them to guard the Jews in the ghetto. The crazy thing was, the flops were Jews too. Jews guarding Jews. It made no sense to me. Flops were not allowed to carry guns, but each had a whistle and a wooden club as long as my arm. They wore uniforms, but they fit no better than our clothes. No high boots, no silver eagles, and of course, being Jews, they wore armbands. So this flop came along and began to yell, shaking his club, Armbands! Armbands! As always, at times like that, we scattered like cockroaches. But this time, one of us got caught. Big Henrik. Big Henrik was clopping away in his new shoes and did not notice anything else until the flop had him by the arm. I heard a bellow and stopped to look back. Big Henrik was standing in front of the flop, holding his head with both hands, while the flop screamed at him and waved the club in his face. The flop was short and scrawny. He had to look up at Big Henrik as he screamed at him. Then I saw a flash of red hair. It was Yuri coming up from behind the flop. He grabbed the club and pulled the flop over backwards onto the sidewalk. By now, the rest of the people were on the other side of the street, pretending they didn't see. Now the club was in Yuri's hand, and Big Henrik was just standing there watching. And that was when Yuri conked the flop on the top of the head, just like that, thunk, like the sounds in the lineup. Now is the flop holding his head, wobbling about the sidewalk. This must have tickled Big Henrik, for he took the club from Yuri and popped himself on the head. That must have tickled the rest of us, for suddenly we were all dashing out of our shadows, passing the club around, bopping ourselves on the head, just hard enough for it to be fun, and sends us lurching around the wobbling flop. When the flop lost his balance and toppled to the ground, we got other notions. We pulled off his shoes and flung them into the street, and all the people on the other side suddenly had eyes and dove for the shoes. And then the flop's jacket went flying, and then his pants. "Take his feet," said Yuri to Enos. But Enos took his feet and Yuri took his arms. And I was having too much fun to think, "Yuri, you're not being invisible." They swung him like a jump rope, like the wagon men had swung dead John, and let him fly. And the flop went sailing through the air, landing in a slushy splash. Yuri wound up and flung the club far into the rubble, and the flop groaned in the snow in his underwear. And once again, there were no eyes on the other side of the street.